Hi, I'm Lia, I'm a visual artist, and in the Matera project I'm drawing and painting scenes from the city called Matera in southern Italy, which I visited last year, and I took thousands of photos and I was obsessed by its intricate structure, intricate architecture. And then when I got back to my studio, I started drawing and painting scenes from that trip. Today I want to show you the process of creating this watercolor piece, which is a side view. This is a view from the side of the St. Peter's Church, Chiesa di San Pietro Caveoso. I hope I'm pronouncing correctly. That is one of my favorite views of my visit. And it's also the first painting that I'm doing of Matera that is not about the intricate nature of the city structure and the architecture. So in my previous work, I was doing drawings of the city buildings, one on top of the other. I found this interesting, visually interesting. And also this type of visual brought me back to my childhood, where I would read about those type of cities in storybooks, like fairy tale books. And in this piece I wanted to do something different. I wanted to focus on one building, this church, and everything else would be kind of blurry, you know, you don't have a lot of details in the back, as you can see here. If you'd like to watch how I created the study, this is the previous study for the current piece. Check my previous video. And today we are going to see how I created the final piece. For this piece, I wanted to use Hahnemühle Expression paper. It's a 100% cotton paper, really good. It has a fine texture. And I'm going to draw the margins with those preset rulers that I really love, because I wanted a margin that was a little bit wider than my gray tape, but not so wide as my white tape. So I decided to draw first and then mask it with the tape later to get a perfect margin this time. You don't have to do this, you can just go straight to tape. And now I'm getting my two reference photos. I have one with more background, another one with the church a little bit closer. And then I decided to use my white tape to mask the margins. It's a little bit wider than the margin that I draw, so I will have to fold it, but it's okay. And because I decided to draw the margin first and then tape it, I had to be sure that my tape would match the graphite line on the paper. So that's why I'm super careful with the tape. These masking tapes by Hahnemühle are very good. I have 4 of them, different sizes, and they were created to be used on watercolor paper. So as you can see, you can safely remove them. But it's still, when I'm removing them after the painting is done, I'm a little bit more careful because, you know, better safe than sorry. And I don't want to tear my paper. And now, before starting this sketching, I will pay attention to the reference, and at first I will look where I think the horizontal line is and where I would like it to be on my paper. So usually I start with the horizontal line, and then from there I start measuring approximately the elements, the distances between elements and the proportions, and marking it on paper. So this is the first step. If I don't like the size of an element and if I don't think the proportions are right, I will just erase them and start again. And I can do this as many times as necessary, because it's perfectly normal not to get it right in the first time. One thing that I might do during the sketching phase is to maybe change a little bit what I'm seeing in the reference to match my vision. So, for example, I can make something larger, bigger, or smaller, or maybe if I'm not trying to be perfectly loyal to the reference, I can just move something a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, because the final painting will be my interpretation of this landscape. It's not necessarily the reality of it. Still, in the parts of the image that I want to be as close as possible to the reference photo, I will pay more attention to the proportions and distances. So this part will take more time in this case, because I'm trying to get the church as close as possible to the real church. In this footage from the side, you can see the subtle texture of the paper. This Hahnemühle Expression paper has those lines, very soft, very beautiful, and I really enjoy it in the final result. And I think they kind of helped me to draw, because I was drawing so many parallel lines to the horizon that I think they acted like guidelines in a way. These arcs are not part of the church, but they are at the same plane and they are very beautiful, so I decided to include them with a little bit more detail than the background. But as you can see in the photo, there were other elements on the street this day. They were having like, I think it was a movie festival or something. But those elements I decided not to add to my painting. They were not part of the city. They were just there for like a weekend or something. You probably will notice that I use the kneaded eraser quite often in my drawings. It might feel like it doesn't make sense, but what I'm trying to do is to remove the excess graphite, but without erasing completely the drawing, because I want to be able to see the lines of the first sketch so I can draw on top of that. I spent quite some time drawing the church because I wanted it to be the main object, the main focus of the painting, and I wanted to be detailed and to contrast with the loose background. So I wanted it to be very precise, while the background would be very loose and blurry and diffuse. Except for the foreground will be a little more detailed, but not as much as the church. So that's why I'm trying to be as precise as I can, but without a ruler, just measuring with my eyes and my feelings. One thing that I really enjoy about drawing and painting a scene, for example, or even an object or the face of a person, a portrait, is that when you do an activity like that, you get to really notice all the features of this place or this face. Because in order to be able to draw, you have to be able to see the difference between sizes and distances, colors. So to draw something is an exercise of being present and paying attention to what you're watching. If it's in real life, even better. But sometimes even in photo, when you draw from a photo, you get to know this place better than if you just see the photo and then move on. So because I'm drawing this church, this St. Peter's Church, I might be able to talk about details on the architecture of this church that maybe someone who lives in Matera won't be able to tell. So this is something really special, and that's why I encourage everyone to draw and paint. It doesn't have to be perfect. The important thing is not the result, is the act of paying attention and noticing the world around you. Now I'm just marking the main features of this part of the landscape. Then I will kind of draw at the same time as I paint. I will draw with the brush, because that part was the part that I said that I was going to be more diffuse. So I don't really need too much detail. And right now I'm just drawing a little bit of the cacti, because this part, it's on the forefront, will have more detail. Now that the drawing is ready, I'm going to organize everything, put away the drawing material, and put the watercolor material on the desk so I can start painting. When I'm starting a painting session, usually I prefer to use a dropper to wet my watercolors. But then while I'm painting, in the middle of the painting, I would rather use a spray bottle. Then I decided to paint an extra page of watercolor swatches with the mixtures I was thinking about using during the painting. I started wetting the paper with a large and soft brush, paying extra attention to the church limits, because I just wanted to have the mountains and the sky wet. The church will be painted only on the second layer. And then I always start from top to bottom and from left to right. So I started with the sky, I wanted a very subtle sky, not too bright, not too many colors, just a simple blue. And I wanted to have this part very subtle. I would like it to feel that like there's a little bit of clouds, but not a lot of definition. And right now I'm doing this as a way to help gravity, because I wanted the blue to slide to a little bit closer to the bottom. And then I moved to painting the mountains. So I decided to use a little bit of purple, some parts more purple, sometimes more warm, sometimes more cold, because I also didn't want too much detail in the background. Right now I'm being extra careful not to paint the church in purple, because watercolor is very transparent. So if there is a little bit of purple in the church, it will be able to be seen when I finally paint the church. So I wanted to avoid it. Sometimes it's impossible. Sometimes a little bit of ink moves to a part that you don't want, but I usually try my best not to. And here I'm adding different colors, because I didn't want this part to be just one color. So as you can see, there's purple, but there's a little bit of blue, a little bit of green. And I also wanted to have this middle part very clear, more water than pigment, because I wanted to feel like mist, you know. For me, this painting is morning, and also the photo was taken during the morning light. And I wanted to keep this feeling of waking up. And this part of the painting is really a pleasure, when you get to play around with pigments and water, and you can watch the watercolor and the colors mixed and slide from one side to the other. It's really a pleasure. Even if you're doing abstract work, I strongly recommend playing with more water, less water, more pigment. For me, this is part of the joy of watercolor. And now we are entering a phase in the watercolor process where you start adding splashes of colors in different places. And at first, it doesn't really make any sense. You feel like you're ruining it, and you're going to have to throw the watercolor painting away. But then you just trust the process, continues painting, and then it all makes sense in the end. What I'm doing is I added a lighter green where I want to have more light. So these are part of the plants that are receiving sunlight. And then I'm slowly moving to darker greens. And now I'm preparing the base color for the rock. In my reference photo, the rock is more grayish, more cold grayish, but I wanted more warm. I was going for more warm in general. The church will also be more warm. And then I'm back to the greens, slowly building the layers of the plants and the layers of the rock. And now I'm adding purple to a shadow part of the rock. So right now it doesn't make sense, but in the end I promise it will. So this is the part with less light in my reference photo, and I want to be more kind of cold instead of warm. So that's why the bluish purple. In this part, there were some plants in the shadows, so that's why I wanted it to be darker. And I'm also adding a little bit of texture to the plants. I'm doing this movement with the brush as if I was stamping the brush, because I wanted to have some parts with more water, other parts with more pigments, other parts completely dry. So this is a way to add texture to a part of the painting. And now I'm adding also some dark parts, because we are moving from the lighter color to the darker color to create the volume. In my reference photo, the church is kind of grayish yellow, but in my painting I wanted to add a little bit of color to the church and this wall in front of the church. So I started with yellow, but then I progressively added a little bit of pink in the mixture. So I kept some parts of the church yellow, the parts that were receiving more light, because the sun was hitting the floor in front of the church and reflecting back to the facade. So the facade I kept in yellow, also this wall on the side with the arches. But the side of the church, I added more color, and eventually I arrived in brownish, kind of warm brown. In the reference photo, the side of the church was in the shadows. It was not receiving direct sunlight. And I kept it this way, but I added more color. In my photo, it was more grayish. I wanted to add more definition to the background. There were two facades that I wanted to be more visible. So I started to add this color that I didn't really like. So I kept trying to fix it. As you can see right now, I was adding a little bit of purple and blue. Still, this is the part of the painting that I would paint differently if I could go back in time. As you might have noticed already, watercolor, when dried, gets a little bit lighter. So it wasn't the end of the world. I think I was able to fix it a little bit. And I was also happy to be able to give a little more definition to those facades that I wanted in the background. And I also liked that I was able to recover a little bit of that blue purple that I liked. This was the end of the first painting session, and next I will paint the details of the church. For the detailed part of the painting, I'm using my smaller brushes, but more important than the size is the shape of the brush. So as you can see, this one has this fine tip, and this is super important. So maybe you don't have a smaller brush, but if you have a medium brush or even a bigger brush with fine tip, it will work for details. And this one is one of my favorites. It's by Skoda, and I do have smaller brushes than this one, but I think this one is one of my favorites for details. One important thing to keep in mind when doing detailed work is not to press too hard the brush against the paper. Otherwise, you will not take advantage of the fine tip. So you will only be able to draw a very fine line with a fine tip if you press lightly. So this is also more important than the brush itself. It's the way you draw the brush stroke. So I recommend, if you'd like to do detailed work, practice a little bit before moving on to the final piece. Here I'm trying to add a little bit of texture to the church walls. Those walls are made of stones, so some parts are darker, some parts are lighter, so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm also adding darker colors to the shadows so we can see the volume of the church better. This church is very old. It's considered to be from the 13th century, but they say it's probably older than that. And it's been through a lot of changes, a lot of renovations. And you can see by this view from the side that the church has different styles, completely different materials. So this tower, right, that I'm painting right now, it looks very, very old, but that part on the top looks like it's more modern. So just by looking to the side of this church, you can already see that it's been through a lot of changes over time, and it's now a mixture of styles. One thing that I like about this building is that it blends well with the hill that it's located, because it's the same stone, the same colors, so it looks like just one thing. And now I'm starting a new painting session. The church part is already done and dry, and I'm going to paint the foreground, the cacti, also some plants, and I'm gonna add more details to the rocks. I started adding a little bit of texture to this part. This is cacti, but also other plants. It's a mixture. And I'm adding different greens, lighter greens and darker greens. This plant was really different. It's one of a kind. That's why it has this special design in my painting. It's the only one that I could see in the photo. And this is kind of not so close and not so far. And this is the foreground. So this is the part that I wanted to add more detail and be a little more careful with volume and texture. So I'm starting with the first layer, and then later I will go back and add more details. I'm adding darker values to create shadows and also to create some cactus behind the cactus, so we could like have a sense of dimension. And then I decided to finally finish this part right in the middle of the paper that was empty, and it needed some plants. Here I'm using different types of textures to indicate different types of plants, adding a little bit of detail to the plants that are closer to where I'm standing, but also a little bit of detail to the plants closer to the church. I'm also adding some texture to the rocks. I'm using the same warm brown that I used before, just a little bit darker, because I decided in this painting that I wanted everything to be a little warmer than the reference photo. So in the reference photo you would see like almost gray, but here I'm painting everything kind of brown. Now I'm darkening some parts of the cacti, also adding more darker parts, because I wanted to have more value in the cacti as a whole, And when working with watercolor, usually you start from light to dark. So if you want to have something dark in the back, you will have to paint it later. So this is the process. And now I'm adding a little bit of texture and a little bit of flowers in some of the cactuses. The painting is almost ready, so now it's just remove the tape and final touches. Right now I'm just waiting for it to be really dry so I can remove the tape. Then I'll sign, and then tomorrow morning with fresh eyes and morning sun, maybe I'll see something else that I might want to change, like a little touch up. I was a little bit worried this time removing the tape because I felt like it was a little more glued to the paper than usual. So that's why I'm being extra careful. And still, even though I'm extra careful, I feel that some part of the paper were a little bit damaged, but not too much. There wasn't a rip or anything like this. There wasn't a tear, but it's still not really perfect. And I'm using this tool because I feel like the fibers were a little bit disturbed and I want to put them back in place, kind of. This block is glued on all four sides, so it's really perfect to paint directly on it and then remove the paper just when you're finished. So, what do you think? Let me know in the comments. And then, as I expected, some final touches, but not too many. And now the painting is ready. I really enjoyed painting this view of the city. As I said in my previous video, this was one of the highlights of the visit, but I also wanted to do something different from what I did before. In my previous works, I was drawing all the details, and in this piece I wanted to have more like gradient in the background, more diffuse feel. Not too much detail except in the church itself. So I really love how the background turned out. The sky, I love the sky, I love the mountains on the back. And here in this part, if you see the photo, there's a city here. Part of the city is here, a lot of buildings, but I decided to just paint it in purple and brownish and have it just like a, I don't know, like a mist. See that part? Very clear here, almost white. So I really enjoyed doing this. And also this those plants in the back, very diffuse. You can even see if it's of trees or bushes. You don't know what it is. And also this part, I didn't want too much detail, only the plants that are next to the building. Those I wanted to have more detail. And for the foreground, I wanted also to have a little bit of detail, but I still wanted to keep the church the main focus. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you like art process video, subscribe to my channel so you can follow along the Matera project and other projects that I might want to do in the future. And let me know in the comments below what you think, and see you in the next one. Bye!